Okay. Good evening, councillors. Welcome to this meeting of the full council. In the absence of the mayor, who's one of those who's given his apologies, others having come from Councillor Chesser, Councillor Fuller and Councillor Jones. We accept their various apologies.
And just on what Councillor Chester did ask, she's not quite sure. She's got a family matter that she's dealing with. She's not quite sure how long it's going to take. So she's sort of giving a long-standing apology if you would accept that.
Yes, she's had to leave the country for family reasons, so I'm sure that we'd all wish her and her family well and hope she's back soon. Right, next item is declarations of interests. The first, any disclosable pecuniary interests? Any other interests? Requests for dispensation?
Mr. Chairman, on other interests, just routinely, given that one of the planning cases that will be wheeled through us this evening is the one. It's the one for the application to build 65 houses, etc., off Stokedale Road. I think it's fair to record the fact that I am a resident and I have recorded an individual objection to the proposal.
Item 3 on the agenda of refit call on record.
I got ahead of myself and asked for any requests for dispensations before everybody managed to make their interests known, but presumably there are none. I don't think I've actually ever seen one for it, in the last goodness knows how many years. Any gifts or hospitality accepted over the value of £50? No. Any inappropriate gifts or hospitality? No. Right, minutes. Approve and sign the minutes of the full council meeting held on the 18th of January as an accurate record. It's happy to circulate it. Is somebody happy to propose what it is? Councillor King, seconded by. That's right. All those in favour? Seems to be everybody.
I need to stand up from the camp. Just going to give a quick update on the party.
Right. The next item is public participation.
Yes, we were just discussing whether Paul was going to speak or not.
Yeah, I'm here to represent the Jubilee Party Committee. David's not here. Preparations coming on really well. We have a lot of things now put into place in terms of organisation. We anticipate by the end of February to return up our schedule, so we'll be able to give you a sort of this is the overall outline of the day in detail of all the things that are going to happen. We've got a few people coming on board and asked me to get involved of late. So, a lot of support coming in that we didn't have at the outset. So, I think it's all looking pretty positive. We did have a meeting with Ian, was it Friday, was it?
Last Friday, yeah.
Yeah, last Friday, to talk about a few concerns that Ian had raised with us in relation to putting on both of the events. From our perspective, I think we feel pretty sanguine that actually we have all of the things, the issues and risks under control. Key one being, will we get the usage of Fletton Field or not? Been in contact with them this week over at NNC. Actively pursuing that. It'd be difficult to see why they wouldn't. I did speak with Helen tonight on the phone, and she said that if there's any issues arising from that, that she would support as well. So, but at the moment it's just a case of waiting and see what comes back, really. The only, of course, the big thing we can't plan for, or we can plan contingency for, but we can't necessarily order is the weather. But yeah, that's the same for any of the sort of events that we would organise. So yeah, that's a key thing really. I think clearly from a budgetary perspective, yeah, I believe you have a budget to consider tonight. That does include all the things that we would like to do. I was talking also with there was a lady who you put me in contact with over NNC. I can't remember what her name was now.
Oh, what the lady you spoke to about the
About
that field? Yes, yeah.
well, she said that apparently there'll be another tranche of
In
grants we
April,
can apply
yeah.
for as well, coming out in April. So even if we're not successful with those that we've applied for now, there'll be a further option to apply for grants specifically for the party. So I think we're in good shape, really. Any questions?
Thank you very much.
So do we, sorry, Chair, through you, do we as a council need to write to NNC in support of the request to have the field? Or are you just going to keep dealing with that with Helen? But it seems to keep some preference. We haven't had it agreed that we can be using it. So as a council, can we consider writing a letter to NNC saying we've got this event, we want to put it on? Because what's plan B if they say no?
Well, I think plan B would be that we would approach Dick and Dave down at the brewery and say, well,
Yeah.
could we use their field? I'll be honest with you, I think that'd be pretty mealy-mouthed to turn down a request to have a Jubilee party on Fletcher Field. It's essentially, private property owned by NNC.
Yeah.
Unless the only reason I could think that they might turn it down might be on health and safety grounds. But we're
covering that, aren't
we're covering those. So
we? I just think the extra pressure, that was all, just that little bit more, can we have a decision please? Because you said the 31st of January was we're asking that they're...
I think if needs be, I think that might be useful. I would hope in the next week or so we would have a reply from George Candler to say whether or not we get the go ahead. But like I said, we've used it in the past for other things like parking actually when we have events. But I can't see why they would want to turn it down, to be honest.
Okay.
Any other questions?
As there are no questions at the moment, I think that could well be because amongst our pack is the most comprehensive set of literature about the
I sent all of the
Jubilee,
working
so,
documents.
I think we've got everything.
You've all read them all.
That was my Sunday afternoon.
Detail.
They are our sort of, working documents that we're referring back to. They may change, they're not all sort of set in stone.
Yeah.
It might have been better if you'd have had a bit of a précis rather than one of them.
I think for the next council meeting, what we will bring is a plan to show the actuality of the day rather than the detail of what's going on underneath it.
I don't think the council needs to forward minute by minute, because the council made the decision. The council just needs reassurance that if they're going to give money to the initiative, that was A, spending it wisely, and B, that we are ready to go, and C, that staffing are happy with the way that we're going to use the staff for the event.
Yeah.
And that if it absolutely chucks it down the rain, there'll be some other way dealing with it. So I think the working party should stick to the detail now,
Yeah.
and the council should just get a very simple process.
Just have a look.
I think it'd be nice to share with you what the day will look like in more
Yes,
detail.
once we get to the planning stage.
Well, I was near the time.
Yeah, when you're ready to do it.
Not the detail of what's made.
Right, well, the next item is consideration of requests. Effectively, there are none. And the following one is to receive a report from NNC Ward Councillor. And unfortunately, we have been given apologies. She's not able to be with us tonight. No doubt, she will, as normal, receive the minutes of the meeting in due course. And if anything blows up that we want to draw to her attention, doubtless we will.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
apropos our Northamptonshire councillor's slot here, she did inform me that she would be present here. So have you received notification apologies from her?
Yeah, she's hurt her knee,
Gather
can't
She's
drive.
been in touch with them.
Yeah.
Absolute apologies, or did she say anything about that she tried to turn up later in the course of the meeting?
No,
Was
she
it
can't
absolute
drive.
apology?
Yeah, she can't drive, she's hurt herself.
It'd be nice if she'd informed me, but never mind.
Why?
She informed me.
No, but she has a busy timetable, especially this evening.
Well, she's sitting at home resting her knees.
Well, if she's injured, she's injured, and perhaps we should simply send her commiserations
Yes.
and wishes for a swift recovery, so she can be here for the next meeting. Right, let's move on. The next one is indeed an update on the Platinum Jubilee celebrations. Well, we've already had the update, so let's just look at agreed the revised budget. That's effectively right at the back of this pack, and seems to be in a figure of £13,765. No doubt, Emma, you will remind us what we've approved so far. Is it
The actual,
13.
the bunting and the deposit for the TV screen has been agreed. I've applied for a grant from NNC, one of their community grants, to pay for the TV and the Portaloos, because at the time that was the only two quotes that we'd got. So that deadline for that was the end of January, and I'm hoping to hear at some point. But there are some other grants. There's quite a few grants that Northants Calc have put out in one of their updates that we can apply for some of the other costs.
Right.
But I can't guarantee that we'll get them.
No.
Could I just mention, I think these potential income from the stalls.
Yeah, the market stalls,
well,
traders
isn't that
would
budget
have
either,
income
so
from
it's
that.
an income stream that actually isn't in there either.
So, are we happy to approve this slightly increased budget as well?
Yeah, there is one thing I'd like to ask about in the budget. Last full council meeting, I sort of spoke to Councillor Fuller about trying to bring something maybe a little bit more for the teenage audience or people who are a little bit younger. And I notice that there is, quote, teenager activity, Fletton, balls up, £350, jugglers to entertain children, teenagers. Now, two questions there. One, that seems to be quite a lot for a juggler. And two, I'll be honest, I don't know if that's a particularly entertaining thing for a teenager.
Right. Yeah. I guess the reality is this:
Okay.
we could approve the budget and leave it to them as to how they spend it. I suppose if we're not convinced by an item on the budget, we could approve a lesser budget and take the amount of money out that was provided for it. I can see Paul's anxious to
I
contribute.
just wonder if I could illuminate
Paul first and then second.
what the juggler is. I don't know if any of you have been to the party on the field that the Creative Angle have organised in previous years. They usually have an area at the bottom of the field set out with a variety of different things to entertain children specifically, and this was to entertain children basically. So there was a budget during the day for someone to walk around the town and do some entertaining in town, but also to come up here and do some entertaining. And I think part of it was to address the request, I think from Lou, who was asking about what are we doing for children on the day, and this was one of the things that we'd be doing for children. So
I would sort of, because I sit on this working group, I'd be keen for us to approve a budget, but I think we're going to have to look at some of it, because I'm not sure, I'm personally not sure. I thought we had 2 venues, plus the sports day on Friday, so I can see that might look a bit, I need to understand that a bit more, because obviously Councillor Fuller's done a bit more work on that, so I think we need to think about that. I think what I would say as a member of the working group is that we would only absolutely spend taxpayers' money if we absolutely had to.
Yeah,
So if we can offset it, and I'm sure that there will be other grants coming through anyway, and we'll do our best, but we have to underwrite it in some respects, I think.
Okay.
But I take your point about what that is. Yeah.
Okay, well, look, rather than getting bogged down in the merits or demerits of having a juggler, I'd rather just look at the budget figure, which is 13,765. We're being asked to agree that, I take it in effect, that we're being asked to agree it on behalf of the working party, of which Councillor King is a member. Councillor Fuller, unfortunately, is one of those who's had to give his apologies tonight, or maybe I should have gone into a bit more detail with it. But I'm quite happy from the chair to make a proposal that we agree a budget of 13,765.
Can I just say something, David, which is that it seems to me that we've been asked progressively to increase this amount. Originally, there was a £10,000 kind of working amount. Then the stewards came in and it was 13, I think you said.
Yeah.
Now it's above 13. At some point it stops.
It's capped now, as far as
it's
I'm
cash.
concerned. That's it.
I just like it minuted.
No, I
That's
totally
the
agree.
amount.
I totally agree with you.
There's no other things going to be added to this,
No, we
This is
Anything
it.
else has to be grant funded
Well,
or not happen.
or not happen.
yeah, can I just clarify, because I think I heard that if grant monies come in, they will offset this amount, so.
Yeah.
Can I also get confirmed that this is the total cost of the event, underwritten by Angle Town Council, but that any amount of grant money that comes in will reduce that by that grant?
Absolutely.
Right, subject to those two caveats, just we want to second that proposition, that's okay. All those in favour, please indicate. It appears to be everybody, thank you. Council matters to receive the mayor's report. Mayor, you're quite right, I ticked it off and I didn't do it. Apologies, get ahead of myself. See, I was so keen to try and make sure we did finish by half past 9. One sneaky technique was to miss every other item. Right, yeah, so to consider a request from Angle Co-op to close an entrance to the car park to carry out repair works. We have that short little memo explaining when and to a degree why. Obviously, for me, it would be quite difficult to refuse the request because if it needs to be done, it needs to be done. I'm sure they will minimise the amount of time it takes because it wouldn't be in their interests for it to take 1 minute longer than it needs to. As they say, certain matters are outside of their control. And it would appear that the store itself is going to be closed for some 3 days. So we're asked to consider the request because it is our car park, so they can't just close it off without asking for our permission. Anybody have a problem with it? No? Right, now we can get on to the mayor's report, which has been circulated in his absence. And as he isn't here to answer any questions, I propose to leave it simply at that. The next one is to receive the parks report, which is also being circulated. However, we do have the clerk present, so if anybody does have any questions that arise out of it, speak now or forever hold your peace. There appears to be nothing.
Can I ask a question? I don't think it's in the report. It might not be appropriate. It's about farmers market parking. That'd be appropriate now or to the end? I can leave it to the end.
It's probably another matter, isn't it?
Yeah.
Concern of it. I mean, if it doesn't arise out of the
No.
clerk, then fair enough. It doesn't really matter where we take it, as long as you don't forget it. Right. To agree to set up an asset mapping working party, which sounds absolutely true, and to approve the model terms of reference as requested by Northants Park. I think maybe the clerk could assist us.
Yes, I've been approached a couple of times, and you've probably seen it in a few of the Northants Calc updates. that Northants Calc are sort of facilitating the asset list that they're putting together for Northants Council of all of their assets across the whole of all of the parish and town councils. And they're asking the parish and town councils to produce a list of all of the assets and any services, as well as any assets of community value that we have in our areas, on a parish online mapping system. And we've got a grant for that, although the parish online mapping system we're getting for free for 6 months. Not quite sure exactly what the grant is for, whether it's to pay towards our time, like staff time of putting this list together. I'm not really sure about that, but we'll take it. And so they want a working party setting up, maybe to sit down and go through assets, and then we put them all on this parish online mapping system and then give it back to Northants Council. I think they're probably more concerned about the new town councils, because they've gone from a situation of being part of a borough council and now all of a sudden they're a town, so like Kettering, Corby, Wellingborough. So there will be a lot of assets where those town councils may want to take on. But Northants Council needs to have a list of all of their assets for the whole of this area, so that then they can sit down and then discuss with parish and town councils whether any of these services or assets are going to be devolved down to the lower level. So this is why they want us to do it. And it's like things like counting street lights, and we're not going to be too bad here, because although there's a lot of street lights, the Old County Council interactive mapping system is still live, so you can use that and you can just click on and see where they are. But we haven't got a lot of actual buildings that NNC are responsible for. Just the library, that little garage on New Road that they inherited from East Northants Council, and Fletton Field, which we've got an asset community value on that, and potentially part of the rugby club.
Well, the first thing it seems to be saying is you can claim a grant by Friday the 18th of March. Looks as if it's a prerequisite to claim it. We have to set up a working party to do it, and it looks, from the way it's worded, it's some sort of compensation for officer time spent in connection with it. So it seems to be a way of getting something back. And the asset mapping working party looks to me like some sort of working party of subdivision of the F&GP, really. So that appears if you're...
Well, the only thing I was going to say was my reaction on reading it was it seemed very unclear what the obligation on us was. I mean, yes, we've got to set up a working party, but that requires an officer and a minimum of 2 councillors to do some amount of work, which wasn't very well defined. I could not really determine what the impact would be, what the obligation would be, and personally, I thought, well, I'm not going to put my hand up for it, because it's an open-ended commitment to do potentially quite a lot of work in potentially quite a short time. So I think the first hurdle is going to be, are you going to be able to find 2 councillors and an officer who are willing to put themselves forward to take part in a working party?
Well, I see there is a briefing that just happens to be tomorrow. No, it isn't. It's last week.
Yeah.
Did anybody go to this briefing?
No, I have received the. I was unable to attend. I have received the notes and all the questions that were raised. Every town and parish council was there. Had all sorts of questions as to why we were having to do it. A lot of people were frightened that if you started listing everything, all of a sudden they're going to turn around and say, right, you're going to do that now. So you're going to pay for your street lights, you're going to empty all your dog bins. But they might say that when they've got this list together. But it's going to take them a while to get the list, get it established. I mean, it's not a bad exercise. it might be time consuming. Rebecca is going to go on the parish online training that they've set up on the 21st of February. It's going to be officers' time more, I think. I mean, I think you should set up I think it would be a good idea to set up a working party, maybe a couple of councillors. We could have one little meeting to talk about what the assets are. Then the officers we can get on and tell you exactly what they are, claim the grant, and put the list together.
It also seems to me that there's very little way of them monitoring how well or badly the job's done. I'm not suggesting we just sort of take the money and produce something that's right, but I don't think there's any reason to be scared of it, because there's no consequences as far as I can see if we happen to miss something that we shouldn't arguably must miss.
How much is the grant?
It's about £580. I think it's something like, is it £9 per elector or something?
9 pence.
Is it 9?
£200 plus 9 pence.
Yeah, I knew it wasn't a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah, that would have been not so bad. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to. I don't think we should worry that if we go back and say, oh crikey, we've got 800 streetlights, and they're going to go, oh my God, right, we're not going to look after these anymore. You're going to have to do that. I'm sure there's going to be some negotiations about. I think it'll be more about maybe buildings and open spaces that the conversations they'll possibly have with these newer town councils.
I think the concern with the services, it's not just buildings and streets.
No,
it's
yeah.
Services, I mean, that's a
Benches.
Yeah, it is. It's emptying bins. It's
that's a
yeah.
long list of things, isn't it?
Notice boards. Just building.
Signage.
But none of those things are things that they don't know that they do. I still don't,
But the town are asking us.
but what benefit is there to our town councillor to tell them they do those things?
They want us to map them, they want us to put it on a big map.
Yeah,
Google
but
Maps.
I think it's just saving them doing it. And I think they think that we will know more.
And they're going to pay us for doing it.
Yes, but I think they think that we will know more than they know, and that's
So they don't
possibly
know- they
quite
don't know what
worrying.
they're doing, so they're asking us to try and find out.
But there's plenty of information. I keep having a lady ring me about this,
All the clerks.
because there is an expectation that we will do it.
Well, that's the point I was going to ask. What's the implications if you don't do it?
I don't know.
I see none.
There is an
I'm assessing that for,
500 quid?
I'm assessing that for Blackbourne Parish Council. I would be recommending.
Just that. Well, I don't know.
There is
I'll
a-
let you take telephone calls when we
There
start.
is an FAQ in the document, and I read with interest when it said, what if we'd say no? And it said, the answer was, you don't get your 600 quid.
Oh, there you go.
No, that's literally all it said.
My view would be, when would we have to sign up for it? And that's what's going to.
Well, I think like now and then we'd have to apply for the
Now,
grant by
apply
the
for it,
18th.
yeah.
Yeah.
I just think it's another role that our staff would have to do, but probably fine.
It's I don't know. It is a.
It'd fit a student doing a project, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
That's what it would fit.
Mm.
With a little bit of guidance from councillors who understand the assets as well as some of the officers.
Yeah.
And then, because what normally would happen, they would map it all and then they would ask for our validation and verification
Yeah.
normally. So I suspect they're doing it because they don't actually know.
Yeah, I think the list, and I remember looking at ENC's asset register. It's very out of date and very complicated. So if they're all like that, they probably just haven't got a clue. I don't know. I'm just guessing because I wasn't able to go to that meeting, but
There will be an online cost though, because they'll sign us up for so many months and then they'll charge us.
Yeah,
That's the
6
impression I
months.
get.
Yeah, 6 months
6
free.
months, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, 6 months free, and then we're going to have an ongoing cost, so. Okay.
Well, yeah, but we're allowed to just
Yeah.
abandon it.
Yeah. Mm. But it's up to you. It's up to you.
There's obviously no huge enthusiasm for it, but on the other hand, I just wonder whether actually we may find, surprisingly, that if we find out what's there, we may be better placed to put pressure on the powers that be to do things with those assets, which might indeed include transferring them to us, because we generally reckon we make a better job of running things locally than sometimes if they're run from afar. So it may not be an entirely fruitless exercise.
Is anybody attending the free session next week then? Is it worth us waiting?
Well, they said there was a session. I couldn't do. Is there another session?
No, it was me. I just looked down and saw, oh, it was the 9th, and I thought that's a Wednesday.
Rebecca's
Well, that's
attending the
tomorrow.
21st.
Oh, Rebecca's attending
Yeah.
the first, right?
Yeah. I mean, my only thought was Fletton Field and making sure that that is noted somewhere.
It's registered then. really.
Yeah, I know, but
But it might also give us an opportunity to put it into a certain amount of historical perspective about how it came to be in their ownership.
It's literally mapping it.
you see, it's literally
Yeah.
just putting a thing on a map. It's not.
Dropping pins on
Yeah.
the map.
It's exactly that.
It's up to you. I mean, I don't mind, but when they start hounding me, I'll give you your number, Jerry.
Well, once you can say it's been minted, we're not doing it, that's what
There's
I'm
no,
going to
there's
tell.
no harm in setting up the working party at this point, it seems to me.
Claiming the money.
And exploring it a little further, and by the 18th of March, if appropriate, putting in a claim for grant. That's a month away.
Sorry.
I think we're going to say the same thing.
But the issue is,
Yeah.
how many councillors have we got who are willing to sit on a working party?
But I doubt, for the reasons that Clark has said, that actually it's going to necessarily impact the councillors involved that much, unless they choose to get involved. At least that's what I'm gambling on, because I'm going to probably put my hand up and say, all right, I'll do it. And my suggestion would be that we say that the mayor and the deputy mayor does it, on the basis he's not here to argue. And it's as good a way of setting it up as any, and we could reserve the right to amend
Abandon it,
the membership, add people, take people off, and so on. At least we've started along the road. Whether we follow it through perhaps remains to be seen.
Well, I move.
We all happy with that?
And you're okay with the terms of reference?
Oh, let's face it, if we said that we would, I'd rather suspect them would struggle anyway.
Rupert, did you propose it?
It's quite, it wasn't anything too
No.
Yeah, looking at it, it's not too bad, other than the fact that the timescales are very
Yeah.
tight.
But in fact, that isn't the true timescales, are they? Emma, they've said if we take all summer to do it, it's
Yeah.
not going to matter. So I don't know where they get that 31st of March date from.
Yeah, I don't-
Actually,
there's-
aiming to complete it doesn't
Yeah.
say that it's mandatory to complete it by that point, so we could aim to complete it by then. If we miss the target, we miss the target.
Yeah, it definitely says.
Yeah, but I think I would
You've got
imagine
about
that
6
there's
months,
not
you've
much.
got the free software.
We've got the software for 6 months. So if you didn't get it finished by then, what are they going to do?
Exactly. And as I say, it does say aims to complete, it doesn't say will
Yeah.
complete.
And you don't have to accept these terms of reference, David, you know, if you
No,
don't want to work
we
them.
could,
Do we have to get the
31st of
grant
August.
though? Is that? I know you have to minute that you've set up a working
we
party.
have to confirm, providing the minute reference, that we set up a working group, not actually say that we have to confirm that we've accepted those specific terms of reference. Maybe we should give the working group the opportunity to
Read them.
revise the terms of
Yeah.
reference once they've sat down and looked at it, rather than spending the next 20 minutes worrying
Yeah.
about it. So, I think Councillor Whitehall proposed it, I'll second it. Those in
On the
favour of
basis
setting
of
up a
those,
working
on the
party?
basis that there are volunteers, what have we got to
Well,
propose?
I have volunteered the mayor in his absence, and hopefully he'll agree, and if he doesn't, he can.
Well, Mr. Chairman, given, I'm quite certain, Emma either knows what all her assets are or knows where to look at them. It was simply a matter for her and staff colleagues to make a list, and for you and the mayor to rubber stamp it. How we identify our assets is our business, not them counts.
Yeah, you can do it that way, yeah.
We've got a reasonable idea before we start of
Yeah.
what's involved. Anyway, let's crack on because we seem to have agreed to do it. So, consider and approve the licence to graze cattle on Snipe Meadow. I bet none of you when you joined the council thought that you'd be looking at licences to graze cattle as part of your duties, but there you go. Well, I glanced my way through it, came to the conclusion that this was a much more comprehensive document than anything I've seen come out of my office in light circumstances. But we do actually need to consider and approve it. Shall I propose that we approve it? Seconded by Councillor Holland. All those in favour, please.
I was going to get a copy for you to sign, but the only one they've sent is PDF and it's got draft all over it. So I'm going to ask them to send
Send a proper one.
a proper one and then we'll get it signed.
Right. The next one is to approve our health and safety policy.
I've got the levelling up and then see levelling up project.
Oh, I've done it again, haven't I? Yeah. So just trying to keep you on your toes. Yes, to receive, I wonder why that was in the pack. To receive a press release from NNC regarding levelling up projects and to consider if there are any projects suitable. Do we know of any suitable levelling up prospects? Do we want to be levelled up? Councillor Hunt, followed by Councillor Holland.
I was just wondering, rather than trying to sort it out now, whether we should delegate that to someone, the states maybe, to think about.
I'm more than happy to delegate it somewhere to sit with us.
And are you happy for us to, because I assume it's not just to the town council, like anybody, any organisations have got projects, so
Yeah.
we
I mean-
put this press release out.
Yeah, it's a bit too big an issue, I think, for us to
Yeah.
just sort of say, oh no, we can't do anything now. We need to have a proper think about it, I think.
Holland, were you going to say
Well,
anything
I
different?
think that one of the levelling up issues, if you like, in Oundle is the lack of transport within the town. And I expect to say that, but I mean, I genuinely do, and that the more that there are estates built on the edge of town, the more that will be kind of thing. And those people ought to have equal access to the town, and we don't want that to be building more car parks, encouraging individual use of cars. So there is already section 169 attached to at least two, I think, of the developments, kind of earmarked for bus or other transport initiatives, and I don't know whether that might be the sort of thing that together with this, if this council was ever prepared to take on providing transport within the town.
I think this one specifically said capital projects, so
Family bus.
yeah. Capital expenditure, yeah.
Anyway, there you go. So that's it.
So I got it.
Levelling up projects. Like Derek, now putting the marker, acquisition, 100% grant towards the acquisition of land and the construction of satellite medical practice.
Yeah.
On the premise that really that then what don't ask, don't get. And therefore, we lose nothing by asking.
Councillor Holland.
Okay, I'm just looking at that. It says it's a online survey. Is that I'm guessing something's A, open to the public, and B, if it is, should we promote that through our?
I mean, they do say this survey is going to close on the 20th of February, and it's already the 15th. So this is 5 days away, which doesn't
Yeah.
give us much time to publicise it to
No.
anybody and anybody to do anything.
Well, we
about
could,
it.
we could put it all out on our social media and
And we
stuff.
can do that straight away, and probably should. I'm not entirely clear if they're seriously saying that they issue a press release on the 4th of February and give you 16 days within which to tell them about a project. Because if that's realistically what this means, it's somewhat unrealistic in terms of its timescale. Because this is the sort of thing where quite rightly it should be delegated to either a committee or some special working party or something to look at. But I'm not convinced there's the time to do it.
No.
No, I hadn't realised that.
If indeed that last line means what it says, the survey is online now and can be accessed right now. I haven't attempted to look at the survey, so I can't gauge anything, but the way it reads, it looks as if you've got to have fleshed out something in advance. Well, actually, we've come up with two around the table, because we've got Councillor Holland suggesting some form of internal town transport by the acquisition of a minibus to be run through the town council. We've got Councillor Reichelt suggesting the provision of land and funding for a second surgery. I think the difficulty with that one is even if we have the land and even if we have the surgery, you've actually got to start it somehow. I'm not sure where the money to do that, and indeed the person to do it, come from.
The whole levelling up project has been, pretty sure, has been conceived of and rushed through in a disorderly rush, frankly. And in all the circumstances, I think it's in our interest to go with the flow, make firm bids and see what comes. If the Department of Levelling Up Housing of the government, as it used to be properly called, go ahead with it, I think they will. I think it'll be a matter for everybody to muddle through with it and see what we can achieve.
Well, I suppose we've got a few days. Clark could complete the survey. I'll chuck in one more into the mix, because even if we do get a cemetery extension, it's going to be relatively limited in size, and it might take us forward a few decades. But at that point, we are either going to have to start reusing cemetery space, or we're going to have to acquire a whole new cemetery area. And it might be that might be another capital project we could look at.
It does specifically say the Levelling Up Fund looks at projects across 3 key investment themes, so you'd have to shoehorn it into transport, regeneration, and town
Cultural
centre
investment.
cultural.
Yeah.
So any project that you think of, which is why, a potential bus
Yeah.
service run by Outdoor Town Council definitely fits, where, although,
The other two
the
might
first side
struggle,
doesn't
mightn't
fit
they?
into Levelling Up, but anyway, it's one of their priorities. But other things about buying land, unless you're going to use it to provide a cultural centre, I don't know, you'd have to be able to make the argument as to why that fits their key criteria.
I was thinking,
I like the transport one, especially if it was electric vehicles circulating around. There was a crazy idea years ago, like in America they have golf buggies with trains, and they circulate around retirement. On an hourly basis, and pick people up and bring them into the centre and then take them round. So that would appeal to me, that particular one.
Yeah. Well, there is a parish council in Northamptonshire that took on when the bus service, the little minibus service that we used to have, when that stopped, they took on the voluntary bus service going around picking people up. I don't know if they still do it, but I know that I can't even remember which council it was, but they did do, got funding and all sorts. So That definitely would,
We
it
would ask
would fit into this criteria.
for non-owned vehicles, of course, we need somewhere to garage them, etc.
Yeah.
And of course, if it was big enough, it could have workshop facilities, which could kill two birds with one stone.
Do you want me to fill the survey out and put the bus service on it?
Yes, I think that seems to be the one thing that's emerging it.
Better.
Councillor Hall.
I don't think the others,
I think the other,
fit.
you're right, no, I hadn't sort of picked up on that point, but Councillor Holland's quite right. I can't see
I've even got one.
how my
Oh, have
idea
you?
of cemetery
Yeah.
fits the idea of
send it to
regeneration,
me,
except
send it to me.
in one isolated incident
Yeah.
about 2,000 years ago.
Joe could say that at this stage we're given high level information about each potential project. Please complete the survey questions. Your proposal will be added to the long list.
Yeah, I
So
know,
there you go.
yeah.
So it'll be kicked into the long grass, but yeah. I
Yeah,
think
but it's
important
worth
that-
putting one in, isn't it?
Yes.
And apart from anything else, we could then make it clear that we have indeed championed that cause, which is
Yeah.
probably something that people in the town.
Just finally, can we make sure that it is, spread via our
Social media.
social media?
I didn't quite hear that, sorry.
I think Councillor Arnold would like us to publicise this through social media.
Yeah,
We
I've
could do
already
it-
emailed Rebecca and
I
asked
could
to
do
put
it
it
as
out
a twin
tomorrow.
thing. We could publicise it, and we could publicise the fact that we are pitching for these electric minibuses to provide transport, particularly from the new developments into town
Yeah.
that are going to happen into town and so on, and facilities to garage them, etc.
Just turn around a platform as well, contracting, that'll be close to our.
Yeah, they can stop outside the village hall.
So, you say that.
Declare an interest.
I will say, talking about electric buses, if anybody's been to Wales, next to the sea, they've just got rid of, they're not now going to keep the train that goes from the town to the beach.
Oh, yeah.
And they just purchased electric bus.
Oh.
So there might be an idea of
Yeah.
contacting saying actually what process did they go through, because actually that's another thing showing our transport survey and what we're trying to achieve here.
Yeah.
It might be a big tick. So yeah, Wales next to the sea are going to have an electric bus.
And there's definitely electric minibuses are around.
That's the way to go.
Yeah. That's just, yeah, I think.
Perhaps we can do a little bit of research into the area as well. Right, we'll move on, and this time we really will get to approve the OTC health and safety policy, which looks stunningly like
It
a
is,
set of COVID stuff.
it's the same, it hadn't been reviewed for, since 2019, and the previous one had been signed by Jerry as the mayor. So it's a tricky one because our health, I've tried to say that it isn't just the mayor that's responsible, it's the town council, but for these types of things, health and safety, you have to have an individual. So I think going forward, it's one of those things that we need to do when we review standing orders at the annual town meeting, because that's when you've got a new mayor and that's when you can get a new one signed. The only thing that's been checked on here, and there's a slight difference, is some of the telephone numbers have been updated. So we just went through to make sure that all of those telephone numbers that are on there are correct.
Right.
So,
That's the only alteration.
Yeah.
and we decided at our previous meeting that we're removing restrictions on numbers at QEH. You can see.
Yeah, this is this isn't the
No,
code. Yeah.
I'll go on to that.
But this presumably would need to do that on this document as well. We would-
No, not this one. That the code. This is the health and safety document. The COVID
Sorry.
one is the next one.
I'm on the wrong
Yeah.
one, Sorry.
You're jumping in. So, the health and safety policy, we're all happy with whatever comes done with it. We'll get somebody before we propose it.
Definitely.
Okay, all right, so you propose it, I'll second it. Those in favour? Everybody, I think. The next one is to review the OTC COVID risk assessment and consider lifting restrictions. Bearing in mind that wearing different hats about an hour ago, councillors took the view as trustees of the QEH that we would get rid of the COVID restrictions. It would seem somewhat inconsistent to maintain them as a council. So shall I propose that we, at this stage, take a similar view with regard to them across the board? Really happy with that? Right. Consider whether the council will give the additional bank holiday on Friday the 3rd of June as a gesture of goodwill to the staff.
Do you go into closed session?
Well, should the clerk absent herself while we discuss it? Actually, it hadn't even occurred to me the staff wouldn't get it off. It was the first time I
Yeah,
saw
did you
that.
see, it was in one of the latest now updates that I sent out. It depended on what you've got in your contract. If you've got 8 bank holidays in your contract, which we have, this is a 9th one, and technically we're not all just entitled to it. But we'll just remind the council that staff are working on the Saturday to help with the event,
Right.
if that helps your decision with regards to the Friday.
I think it would be extraordinarily churlish not to, so can I propose from the chair that we give the additional bank holiday on Friday the 3rd of June as a gesture of goodwill? Seconded
Thank you
by
very
Councillor
much.
King, all those in favour?
Thank you. I'll write to all the
Further,
staff and let
perhaps
them know.
consider revising the contract. Because I-
Refer to just bank holidays.
Yeah, I immediately looked at our contracts at VA, and we just say bank holidays.
Mine says bank holidays.
Yeah.
Doesn't
Yeah, we've
specify
actually
what they are.
specific, I'll say 8.
Yeah, because they advised us to those.
Well, we'll refer that to the personnel committee.
Yep.
Yeah.
To review, but I see the logic in making a change. Right, on to financial matters, to approve the bank reconciliation, balance sheet and budget for January 2022. We appear to have in excess of £500,000 in the bank, which is that is simply to approve it, so can I have somebody to propose that we do? Seconded by
Yeah.
Councillor Arnold, possibly just a note. Those in favour? Right, next one is payments for January 22, proposition of the schedule of payments for January 22 as presented at this item are paid, which is in the sum of £37,054.05. I'll propose that from the chair, seconded by Councillor Holland this time. Those in favour? Everybody. Right, the next 3, no they're not, the next 2 are to receive. So to receive the interim internal audit report, which I think we simply are required to minute the fact that we have done. And since it says, in my opinion, the council is keeping their books and records in very good order and is following due process in all elements, I think a little word of congratulation to the staff responsible for ensuring that we got such a glowing reference. So that's the internal audit report, internal control checklist, which is part of the process of ensuring that we get audit reports like that, and that's there. And is available for all to see. So we should consider that duly received. Next, to approve the financial risk assessment, which we last looked at. I can't remember when. Didn't feel that long ago, but it's the sort of thing that one needs to keep constantly updated under review. So, is there anything in it that you want to bring to our
The
attention?
financial
or
risk
anything that's
assessment,
changed?
we reviewed it in finance, and
Some very minor changes.
I think there were some really small changes. One was about the, if you scroll down to the bottom, in others, we added in
Develop a 5 to 7 year.
in maintenance, yeah, we added in the,
And there's some changes to do with finance, wasn't there?
and there was a duplicated line of cash handling that we took out. Cash banking, I think we've got that sort of twice, haven't we? And that was all.
Well, on the basis that that was reviewed at the Finance and General Purposes meeting that I wasn't able to attend, Are we all happy to approve that?
Yeah.
Does it need formally proposing?
I could just put that you all agreed to approve
Yeah.
it, that's fine.
Now, the next one says, to the effectiveness of the internal audit review documents. I'm not sure whether I'm approving it or receiving it, but I suspect I should be approving it. But the
Yeah.
word approve seems to have disappeared out of the agenda. So that's a separate document, which presumably went through a similar process.
Yeah.
Anything to add to what we've already said, or shall we just?
So 12806, 12807, we went through, and obviously
Yeah.
what I've just said,
Yeah.
all of those in detail at last week's
Mm.
meeting. So
It's been
my
reviewed.
recommendation is that they are approved as they now are.
As they now are. Right,
Yeah, I've got, yeah,
all
that's
happy
fine.
to do that?
Yeah.
Good. To approve the quote to repair the entrance to the car park at Fletton House. I can't say I particularly noticed there was a problem with the entrance to the car park at Fletton House.
It's terribly holy, we're getting a lot of complaints about it. We've got a variety of quotes that you will have seen. The first one was for sort of patching. The second one was more about cutting all of that area out and resurfacing at 4,750. And then the final one was the same sort of thing, but a bit more expensive.
I mean, the way, just, I'm not particularly expert in this, but the way I read it, the first two look very similar in terms of what they're going to do, although one's quite a lot more expensive. The third one is quite a significant more amount of work. But
Yeah, the third,
do we have a view as to whether a patching is adequate for now, or do we think we should be looking more towards the scope of work in the third one?
for me, I thought that the first one was probably just, like some of the patching that you see on roads. I thought the second one may have been a little bit more involved. Definitely the third one would be to take the whole area out and completely redo it, which is it.
I mean, to be honest, I can see no difference. The second one has one line that says cut out damaged property and reinstate. There's hardly a detailed description. The first one, which was the lower quote, did describe what it does. It says cut out affected areas and reinstate. So I can't see any difference between what they're going to do.
It also says it's guaranteed for 10 years.
Yeah.
On that first one.
So I would say that to my mind, it's a decision between the first one and the third
And the
one.
third one.
And there's a very considerable difference in the price, and it is guaranteed for 10 years.
Well, it's a different scope though, isn't it?
Yeah, I appreciate it's a very different scope, but
I don't remember the Estates Committee thinking that there was really funding for the more dramatic option. And our leaning was more towards patching it up.
Yeah.
And making good, because there is money in the Fletton House maintenance budget this year to be able to do that.
Lisa and I looked and that we hadn't got enough money in that budget to cover the third quote.
No, we haven't, no. So that's a whole different ballgame in many ways.
Councillor.
Does this cover the path to the doctors? Or
No.
is it simply?
It's literally
It's
just,
the
as you
roadway
come
there,
in
there.
to the car park, there's some holes. I mean, John patched it up about 3 or 4 years ago. And it did last for a while, but obviously, it just sort of comes out. I mean, I'd say go for the first quote purely because of the number of complaints that we're getting from people coming into the car park. And it's whether we get into that situation where people have complained, and then if they do damage their car.
Well, then, I'll propose that we accept the first quote of the figure of £2,800.
Yeah.
So somebody want to second that? Councillor Davis, did I think. Are there any amendments? Well, it could really be an amendment. If you're against it, you would vote against it and propose a different one. All those in favour of that? Everybody's in favour of that, good. Right. Clerk House is going to cost us some more money to approve the quotes to complete the electricity inspection of Fletton House.
Yeah, this is because we've been in this building over 5 years now. It's the same as the situation with the courthouse. We need to have an inspection as we are with the QEH as well. So we've got a quote for this building too. I don't know if you did see the email I sent. We did go to somebody else and they said because they would need to come in and completely inspect the building, it would cost a lot of money. So
that's was that 2,310?
Yeah.
You're happy to go with that? I'll propose it again.
Yeah.
Seconded by Councillor King. All those in favour? Right. Highway matters. I can almost sense that Councillor Holland will be making an observation about ever increasing budget in a minute. To approve the quote for the proposed transport study. And we have got a quote in front of us in the sum now of £15,000, which includes monitoring in a lot more places than we were originally going to do. I think that was the result of the working party either meeting together or communicating by their emails, chucking in suggestions as to where we should put things.
But I think, sorry.
Yeah, Councillor King, more about it.
I think there was a bit of, there was a bit of scope creep in some ways, I think, because there's nothing wrong with putting in more traffic counts. And that's what the email conversations were about. I stayed out of those because it wasn't an issue when we did this 10 years ago, but there was a fair view from, I think, at least the mayor wanted to count more traffic and put more counters around the town. And the problem is that TPP do the work. They don't do that as part of their formal work. In other words, they absorb costs or get people to do it. So they would have done so many for free for us, but we're being successful. I think it was going to be 3 to start, I think.
yeah,
3 which were included in the price, and then they're charging us, I think, 200 quid.
So I think the original, yeah, so I think because if you think about it rationally, if you're doing a transport study, it's about what's required for the future. So you do need some data, but actually you think about all these houses all built, what's the effect on traffic, and that's where they score, because that's what they do professionally. However, the members of the working party, through email conversations, put in a few more traffic counts, so the price or the fee, I think what was the original fee, 14, was it?
about in the original one,
Yeah.
the original cost.
The original cost.
Yes, yeah, it was, yeah.
So.
But I think,
It's gone up slightly, it's gone up 7.
yeah, I think, but the time that we were talking about this and agreed an amount of money, I think we agreed 15,000 or up to 15,000, yeah.
Yeah, I think in the end it is within what we were prepared to spend. We thought we might get away with less. I think the rationale was certainly mine for suggesting the locations, and you can gauge that just by looking at where they are. It's really looking at areas which are going to be affected by the 2 developments which put out on planning permission, hence looking at things on Blackhorn Road, looking at things on New Road, and similarly, if you like, looking across to East Road, South Road and so on, which may be affected by the other development.
Yeah. So basically, they would have absorbed the cost of the original 3, but now there's an extra 5, and that's it's £200 for them extra per count. So we will get more than just counts of traffic, though. You'll get speed and you'll get type. So there will be a lot of intelligence-based, actually, after half term, I think we're proposed to start the counts. So we will have traffic flow information a bit more detail than we've got now. So it was obviously right and proper to bring a slightly revised budget to the council this evening. So that's the rationale of why it's gone up to £5,000.
So, are we happy to approve that quote, which was within our original target budget, but outside the initial figure that we quoted? I think some of that information
That'll be good.
will be useful. I mean, I quite like the idea of some information about speeds on the Blackthorn Road and the recent sad event. Of course, if you're going to do that, you probably want to put one on the Benfield Road as well for obvious reasons. But shall I propose, therefore, that we accept the quote for the proposed transport study in the figure of £15,000?
King's excluding VAT.
Yeah, or we pay it, but we get it back.
Yeah.
So those in favour?
And just to reassure council, that will be the map, that's it.
Yeah.
There will be there are no other costs now, so we will gather decent information and they'll propose a plan for the future, so I think we scored twice.
Right. To consider complaints from residents of St Peter's Road regarding concerns about parking for people attending rugby matches at the Rugby Club in Occupation Road. I'm very familiar with that road, albeit that I haven't lived in it now for 6.5 years, but I still travel up and down it quite a bit. It's always bad. It's particularly bad when the Rugby Club have a lot of people down there because there are cars everywhere. In fact, when I went through that the other Sunday, not Sunday just gone, but the Sunday before that, I sat there and mused that if there was any construction traffic trying to use the quote-unquote approved route into the construction site, they'd never get there. Of course, they shouldn't be moving on a Sunday anyway, rather hopeful big condition that say not. But of course, if you have that sort of problem on a Saturday, in the morning, it would be a major issue. I'm not quite sure, realistically, having said that, what could be done when one could encourage the rugby club to discourage people from parking there, but then they've got to go somewhere. And it's only going to displace the problem to a degree. Or you end up sticking yellow lines all over St Peter's Road, but there's a practical problem with that because a lot of the houses on there do not have any private drives, let alone garages. They have to park it on the road, or they're going to end up parking it on the road. Councillor.
What's the current situation of car parking at the Rugby Club? Is there?
Okay, in light of the complaints, I received an email from Emma.
Lisa, I think,
Lisa
sent me
said,
original email.
because
Yeah.
obviously I am a member of the Rugby Club. I'm on the committee, and the safeguard officer of the Rugby Club, I've got to declare problems on.
Perhaps you can note that Councillor Davis is declaring.
I'm declaring interest in the Rugby Club. And as a result, what happened was, on that particular Sunday, Stanford visited us. And because Stanford is very far away, we tend to get, depending where to which club's done, on a Sunday. It's normally a Sunday. Saturdays, the first team are in the Premier Midland League, so they do get supporters that generally run around town for their home fixture. The away supporters normally now start coming in a coach, and that we house now. That's Saturdays. Sundays are a different ball game altogether. You have the minis and juniors. We all used to meet at 10 o'clock in the morning, and they'd be done till 12. And then the juniors kick off about 11, and they go through to about 2 o'clock. Minis and juniors, 9:30. Clubs are, since January, have got back to almost normality in terms of numbers. COVID is still causing an issue over transport, where parents would ordinarily bring 2 or 3 friends. They are still travelling on their own, so you're getting more and more vehicles. That's the side of it. Depending which club it is in your locality, and I would say Stanford, Oakham, Market Harbour, they tend to bring more support, more players, should I say, than others. They're well-supported clubs. That particular Sunday, we had provision at it within the club. There is probably around, I could probably sit and say about 80 car parking spaces to 100 car parking spaces at the club.
Right.
But we also have we do utilise the bowls club. We've got permission on certain days to use the bowls club. So on that day, we had the bowls club away as well, but it wasn't enough for Sanford. Sunday just gone, we had Peter for a visit. Because of what happened with regards to Sanford, I contacted the council and was able to use the memorial field where we parked between 80 and 90 vehicles in the memorial field. And I've heard from the club tonight, we haven't had one complaint. So probably by taking that traffic away from, I literally stood on St Peter's Road. Are you for the rugby club? Yes, please park there. Are you for the yes, please park there? And we managed to get them parked in the memorial. So I thank the council for allowing us to park in the field. We then still filled, because there were two other fixtures after the Minis, we still filled the rugby club car park during the morning, and we still had the bowls club, which we had as a sort of spillover, but I don't think we got the same issues. So I think the plea for us is, from the rugby club perspective, is on those busy days, could we continue to use the memorial field, subject to the ground conditions? Because when the weather gets bad, you don't want cars going on there showing it. But I think that's a judgment call that, on the council's behalf, I could wear two hats and review that subject to what it's like for the weekend, saying, no, we're not going to park there. Please, you're going to have to go and try and park somewhere else. But please don't obstruct people's driveways. And we do put it out. We do put it out on all our social media outlets in terms of what we use for the rugby club. But you can't, inconsiderate parking is inconsiderate parking. That's people as individuals in cars. And we, again, unless we say that we're going to have to employ the council will have to send a traffic warden down here on a Sunday morning. That's a different environment. And that's not necessarily the rugby club or the town council's responsibility.
Is there scope long term to increase the size of the car park at all?
No, we don't own. There is a piece of land on the right as you're going down Occupation Road. It's all owned by school. But we think that's a piece of land I think the tennis club have, because then they've got two tennis courts. We've got 2.5 pitches on the right, and then we've got the first team pitch, clubhouse, and the car park. And everything else on the left, you've got tennis club, allotments, and the bowls club. So we're all in the same area, and I think we're trying to support each other as clubs when we have events on. So our plea is that we still, we're able to have the council's support and trying to, and it just happened on that Sunday. Numbers, you've got 250 to 300 kids there on a Sunday morning. That's how popular the rugby's becoming down there. We've just got to try and get parents saying, can you bring your kid in another car with a friend?
Are they starting to get too big for where they are?
Yeah.
Because there needs to be a bit of a long-term view.
There is. There have been conversations, not necessarily there have been conversations in relation to trying to source land in the area. Because as the club is more successful, it attracts obviously a better class of players, should I say, who wants to come from other towns. Even my age group, I've got 3 lads that come all the way over from Lincolnshire to come and play for us on a Sunday morning, which is great for the club, because developing the players as we go along. The first team has done very well over the last 4, so we're a victim of our own success, and that attracts other people to the club. For a small town, we punch way above our weight in terms of what we're offering. But yes, it would be an ideal, Councillor King, that we find a suitable piece of land. We need about 5 or 6 acres, I think, to then relocate. But it's tough.
And when you say relocate, do you mean relocating the entire club so you wouldn't want the facility?
Well, possibly that would be the thing.
Would that be a second area?
It'd be a case of relocate the whole club with all the facilities that require. That would be a dual purpose probably location. It's just and I know we've signed. I think we've got a lease that's longer, but. Again, it's trying to find that land in the area that would be suitable.
Given the suggestion about sort of a more concrete arrangement for the use of the recreation ground, parking for the rugby club, perhaps that element should go to the estates
Yeah.
for consideration. As to what more, as a full council, we could do, I'm not entirely sure. It's really useful if we have a membership rugby club who is able to actually give us chapter and verse, because otherwise I think we'd be saying we need to go along with them. I think all that we can do is continue to have a dialogue between council and the rugby club, because it is the rugby club, isn't it? It's not the tennis club, it's not the tennis club, where this is the rugby club, which it's great that it's thriving, it's great that it's getting so many children involved, but there's always a downside to the upside.
I'm happy to be that link with the club, if the council are happy with that.
Is there anything more we can say on this, or shall we move on? Right, to receive an update on the installation of the speed indicator device and to consider the data downloaded so far. I'll ask the clerk to interpret what we see.
So we, the sign got installed, sorry, I'm just trying to find my, I can't find my,
56 miles an hour. So
It's 5 o'clock.
That's what's
Just
quite
think of-
talking.
I mean, if it's
Yeah.
I looked at it, you just see that.
Is that
I thought it was almost impossible. Where has my document gone? Could you just tell me what I called it?
Speed indicator device.
Yeah.
Okay,
Speed indicator
yeah,
device,
I've got it.
21,129
We've got two sheets.
Yeah, so this data was from 28th of January through to the 9th of February, so only 12 days. And as you can see, there's 25,000 cars just going in one direction, which I was amazed at, because I mean, that's 2,000 off a day. We're not quite sure about these are the graphs that are on the software that you get given that goes with the sign, but we're not quite sure about these graphs, so we're going to try and see if we can improve on them, because where you'll see that somebody was speeding the maximum speed at 56 miles per hour, we can't seem to see that on that graph that's underneath. So Rebecca's going to have a little bit of a play with it.
Well, that red line shows it, doesn't it?
Yeah, but if you see it only goes up to 40 on the side.
Yeah.
So we can't work out why it's not.
I mean, I don't know, but I interpreted it as that was they didn't take one, but they took not an average, because that wouldn't make sense, but they somehow had normalised it to
Right, okay,
to
yeah,
have
yeah.
a better indication. Otherwise, you'd have one-off outliers or spike all over the place, wouldn't you?
Yeah,
So they must have sort of normalised it. But I mean, when I looked at it, I thought that was quite encouraging, that there was vast majority is well within the speed.
Yeah.
Which I don't actually find a surprise, because you struggle to get above 30 down there anyway most of the time, because
Yeah.
you're stopping and starting every 5 minutes to let cars move the other way.
I mean, there were two occasions. I think there was one at 4 o'clock that was about 40 miles an hour. I just think they're anomalies. It must have been at a time when there was just nothing on that road, and whoever did it just drove. I mean, there is a bit more speeding in the early hours of the morning, that sort of thing, but
I mean, you can see from the charts that the average speeds are higher in the early hours and late, very late at night. It's not surprising, because that is when.
yeah, we've got it set so that it flashes at 26 miles an hour, but nothing below, because it just saves on battery really for that. So it's not flashing every time. And the cut-off is about 40 miles an hour, because we were advised that if you don't have a cut-off, people will try and see how high they can get their speed. So if you after 40, they're not going to see it. Then it doesn't. It means that people won't try and get it up to 99 miles an hour or something. I think it's probably a good idea to leave it there for between sort of 6 to 8 weeks, so that people get used to it, but not too much that they ignore it. The second site, we've got 2 other sites that were added to the agreement in the beginning. One's on North Street and one's further into town. on West Street, so nearer to the 20-mile-an-hour limit. But people have already come forward with a few suggestions of where they would like it. But I think what we'll have to do is, if we choose some different roads that we want to put it on, we need to go to highways, because they need to make sure that you can't just put it anywhere, because it's got to have 100 metres range to pick up the speeds, and it's got to be in a place where people can see it, but it's not going to obstruct. So I imagine that we come up with some roads, ask highways, they'll look into it and say whether we can or we can't. So the intention is that we can move it around the town and put it in the problem areas. Not had many comments about it at all, though.
Nothing's come through on the media, right?
No. Just a few people when Rebecca just put a notice out to say that it was up, and a couple of people said, "Oh, we need that on this road. We need it here." But
It's
yeah.
interesting, actually, speed, because there's a perception about speed. But the data doesn't always, there always going to be a spike. So you've got someone at 56,
Yeah.
which is amazing, like we said. But ultimately, it's, quite a lot of it's they're in speed.
Yeah.
And if we compare another batch with this, we'll see whether there's an effect of the, because I see it in the morning, because I go down West Street in the morning. So yeah, the data actually sometimes doesn't, you think it's going to be something in it, and it's normally.
When we were putting it up, it was really funny because there were cars going by, and you think, crikey, that's really fast.
Yeah.
But it wasn't, it was coming up at 26, 27. It's funny that the original complaints that came from people in West Street were saying that people are driving down there at 60 miles an hour. Well, they nearly are, but yeah, well, it might be the same person. Who knows? But
They're trying to get the camera together.
yeah, but it's but the majority of people aren't speeding.
For me, it's the numbers. It's the numbers.
I think the numbers are the interesting.
25,000 cars.
I have to confess, I couldn't resist doing that.
You can go.
It's one every 40 seconds. So it sounds like a lot, but 40 seconds is quite a long time.
Yeah.
40 seconds before the next car comes on. I know that's an average, so yeah. That's average over the whole 11 days. Over the whole 11 days, it took 25,000 divided by the number of hours in the
Yeah, you're going to have quite a day,
yeah,
I suppose.
I mean, obviously, during daytime, it's going to be every few seconds,
Yeah.
but actually, you're not going to persuade the Highways Authority, for example, that that's a busy road with this working every 40 seconds.
Yeah.
Let's move on. To consider the request from the relative of the victim of the recent tragic accident on Blackpool Road, who is asking whether or not it's possible to put some sort of plaque or something on a bench nearby, which I assume is one of ours.
No, it's actually a highways bench. It's not.
Or near the bottom
Yeah.
of the road.
I mean, my first reaction when I saw it was, irrespective of how we feel about it, it's not in our
We would have to say.
Yes,
it's highways.
I must admit, I just assumed that it was one of ours, and that's why the request had come in. And I suspect what we could therefore do is ask him to take it up with highways.
Yeah.
I don't know what their policy.
I mean, I thought I would, depending on what you said, I thought I would just write to Sarah Barnwell and just say that we've had this request. And, but I mean, if you're happy for me to say that the town council are quite happy for it to happen.
Can we say we support them?
Yeah.
I certainly don't have a problem with it. But yeah, let's say that certainly the town council would have no objection or even positively supportive of it if it is possible. Right, to receive information from NMC regarding the enhanced partnership under the Bus Service Act stakeholder consultation. Consider how to respond. This document went on and on and on.
Could I summarise it for you, David?
I would be delighted if somebody is capable of summarising it, because
And
that
the
is.
reason I'll summarise it for you is because it is almost entirely irrelevant to Angle Town Council. In fact, what they're looking at are urban bus routes, and I had been under a complete misapprehension as to what this was, and had put in, I'm sure we did as a council as well, something around the lack of provision for buses. And in fact, in their letter, they say, oh, a lot of the responses we got were about lack of provision of buses, but in fact, that's not what we were ever asking you. What it's about is going to greener transport, particularly in urban areas. And to my reading of it is there's almost nothing here of relevance to us. It was a huge disappointment to me.
There was one reference, I think, to the Oundle, Peterborough, Corby route.
Yeah.
We're on the map.
Only to say it will remain an hourly service.
Yeah.
So it never really was what I thought it was going to be.
No.
And when you hear the words enhanced bus service, I don't know, does it say to you provision?
Yes, I think the word enhanced gets you a bit excited.
Yeah. So I couldn't actually recommend that we do respond to it. I don't think there's anything in it for us to do, and that we'll be better off pursuing some kind of independent transport scheme within the town based on Section 106 money and or any other funding we may want to get. This is not going to be the way.
Well, I'm very grateful to Councillor Holland, having waded her way through it, to be able to tell us that it wasn't worth wading your way through it.
Well, I looked at it and I said earlier, I don't know what they want from us on this.
No.
And the answer is it probably wasn't really ever directed at us.
No,
But
yes, I say I was under a
it got
misapprehension.
sent out to everybody.
Yeah.
Right, well, I rather like the idea of consideration perhaps respond, let's not bother. There's nothing in it, so unless anybody disagrees with Councillor Holland's approach, I suggest we move on. The next one is planning matters, which is to receive the minutes, not one but two meetings, because we had our normal monthly meeting, which just happened to be on the 1st of the month. But unfortunately, no sooner had the agenda for that been published than David Wilson Holmes put in their anticipated kind of reapplication in respect of the Stokehill roadside. That threw us into a certain amount of confusion before we started, because this room wasn't available to us. And we sort of knocked around dates to try and work out when we could have the meeting and where. And we ended up on Monday of last week meeting at QEH. And because of the sensitivity of the application, I suggested that councillors generally attended as opposed to simply councillors who were on the planning committee if they were in a position to do so. We had, in fact, the entire planning committee there, and councillors Holland and Rycolt attended too, and some of the councillors gave apologies. I was absolutely delighted that we had a good turnout of councillors, because we were overwhelmed by the parishioners who turned up. I think it's possibly the highest number I've actually seen turn out for any planning application that's been before us. Every time we put out chairs, we ended up having to go back and get another one, because yet more people turned up. I didn't actually count them, but it was a
23.
significant number. I think it's fair to say most of them were either resident in Clifton Drive or resident in Warren Bridge, because those are the two areas of the town most affected by what is planned. Councillors went through their usual process, but we had three individual speakers from the floor actually make representations to us. They all raised various issues of concern about the development, principally flooding, traffic issues, particularly around the bridge, some concern about the proposed footbridge crossing the Ripple Brook, connecting the new development to Clifton Drive, where there's in fact a pavement within the development, and some associated issues with that bridge around people who were worried about security. Perhaps happily from the public's point of view, councillors who had of course already objected to the original application were far from convinced that the new application was adequate to meet their concerns, and unanimously decided to object again. So that was the process. Following that meeting, I drafted something and circulated it amongst the planning committee. Then I circulated it to the two councillors who'd attended, who weren't on the, but aren't on the planning committee, and then I circulated it to everybody else. And I think in each iteration it changed slightly, to the point at which I think it was probably only last night. But anyway, I circulated what I think is a final version of the document the other night. It has to go in by the 18th. In fact, the clerk and I exchanged emails earlier today, and I said, look, I know I've produced it, but just in case anybody leaps forward at the full council meeting at this stage and wants us to change or add something to it, we'll hold fire and send it off in the morning. Certainly the objection that we're putting in raises all those points. I should actually say there were two other key points. One is a fairly standard one because it's all to do with infrastructure issues. The other was to do with the level of affordable housing on the site, because the developer was proposing far less than the 40%, which is the kind of going rate, arguing, as developers invariably do, that they could economically develop the site at 20%. Councillors had in fact objected to the level of affordable housing in relation to the first application, so absolutely nothing in the second application to write home about, because basically, although it changed the size of some of the dwellings, so we had more 2-bedroom dwellings and less 3-bedroom dwellings, but the quid pro quo for that was that we had more 4-bedroom dwellings and some 5-bedroom ones that we haven't seen before. And the other issue around infrastructure, Councillor Reichold raised the issue of the capacity of the surgery. And in fact, the surgery itself, or at least the named clinical commissioning group, had in relation to the original application pointed out that they were already at capacity, notwithstanding the fact that there were 2 developments with outline permission, and now there was this one as well. And they were basically saying what we need is lots of Section 106 money in order to do something about it, to secure increased provision. In fact, what we put in the revised objection is a specific reference to that, but to say that Section 106 money is rather like after the event money, and what we should really have is sufficient capacity in the town before this is approved, not approve it and then figure out how the hell we're going to get the increased capacity. So that's gone in as part of the objection.
Can I just say that I think the healthcare provision is fairly critical at the minute, because they're moving the deck chairs around in terms of the commissioning arrangements, but that's not the original there, in my view. But Lakeside must have a view about where they need to be as well in the medium term, because they're a bit landlocked here. They can't really expand. Satellites might be a way of dealing with it, but there needs to be sort of a meeting of minds, not just in terms of development and the Section 106, but where's the practice going, from my perspective, in terms of healthcare planning, because it is going to grow. There's no doubt the population of the town's going to grow, and I don't know what the algorithm says when they trip over, because they get income from every single resident that registers there as well.
It did occur to me that the planning committee could perhaps invite a representative of the surgery to attend a planning committee meeting on the back of the comments that they've made to that particular planning application, with exactly that in mind, to discuss with them what they think they might need, how, if at all, this council might be able to assist them in terms of applying further pressure and so on. So we'll see whether anything comes of that.
David, it might just be worth noting that Tom Hersglove is pursuing this as a campaign at the moment. And every time we get an update on what's going on, it seems to me they stall him every time. It's very difficult to get any information from them or what their plan is. Even he, I mean, by all means have them here and ask them, but
Well-
they're well versed in putting you off.
Yeah, well, of course, they might just say no.
Yeah,
But
just say
it
no.
does seem incredibly surprising if they're chuntering about it in terms of a response to a planning application, and then their MP is clearly trying to help them.
Yeah.
They don't seem to engage with it.
I
It must be
find
very
that
frustrating for him, I would have
Yes,
thought.
yeah.
Councillor Rycroft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In my comments on your first draft representations, which I fully supported, with a few suggestions, I clearly ended with the conclusion that Northampton Council Planning should not consider the application until adequate arrangements have been made for the reinforcement of the medical practice. Adding, of course, that it would be technically practical just to go in with that firm recommendation on the grounds that where added medical practice went would be a separate matter. So that should help all concerned to work on the NHS authorities as a whole to get their acts together and shovel in the resources.
Yes, indeed. I'll mention one other thing arising out of all of this. The clerk and I received an email from a gentleman who is in fact a former councillor and therefore known to many of the people of us. He owns some land which he himself would like to develop elsewhere. He is exercised by the application, but there was an element of me that said, yeah, the reason is that you'd rather that your piece of land got planning permission than his piece of land. He too was making points, however, around the affordable housing numbers and so on. And I thought that it would be appropriate for me to send him a copy of the town council's response, but make it clear that this is not an indication of support or otherwise for his beef with the MC, because he had a considerable dispute with the MC when they were putting together the local plan, which he still seems to be very aggravated about even now, because the MC itself exists as a tendency, but it still clearly rankles with him what happened. That's not a debate I want to get into with the gentleman, but I think that he needs to be aware of what this council's stance was on that application. That's everything on planning. Estates, to receive the minutes from the estates meeting held on the 25th of January. Councillor Holland, is there anything?
No, true chair was there.
In that case, Councillor Davis, is there anything you want to draw to our attention?
No,
I think we missed the boat with some trees, didn't we, in terms of the trees, we've got to wait in relation to planting trees.
Yeah.
In terms of the trees are in short supply, I'm led to believe, so we will have a planting of trees later on.
We're not going to make the Jubilee,
We're not making Jubilee, but we will be planting trees.
In that case, I'll move swiftly on to the Climate Working Party, which was to receive an update. Now, we've probably looked at Councillor Jones had been here, but unfortunately he's given his apologies, but we do have some notes of a working party meeting that was held on the 31st of January.
And two attendees are present. Sorry? Two attendees of that meeting are present.
Yes, so, but, as you rightly said, others were present. So is there anything that you want to add to what's in there in terms of an update from the working party?
Not particularly, I just want to point that Councillor Arnold and myself were there, relatively quick, short meeting, but we just started work basically. We've done some very initial work to try and quantify what our current carbon footprint is, just by looking at energy bills. We've got a few priorities that we're looking at. We're going to try and concentrate on this place first because it's easier, because we've got more control over it than, for example, the core tax. And it's also our biggest energy users, so our biggest emissions are as a result of gas and electricity consumption in this building. So we'll, at some point, I doubt, want to sit down with Emma and the team and see what we think might be doable to try and improve that situation. That's a first step.
Everything has to start somewhere, and I'm pleased to see that we're making a start. So, Communications Working Party, to receive the latest article for the advertiser. Again, that's been circulated. And if there's anything more we can particularly discuss in relation to that. I think it might be sensible to defer the next item to the end of the agenda, simply because we're going to potentially do that in camera. So I'm going to skip past it and come back. Correspondence for information, the employment law update, the latest monthly one is there. And to receive the Northants Police locally identified priority surveys outcome, which is quite a mouthful, for September to December. I think you have any comments in relation to that particular document? Total silence. Right, we'll do the any other relevant matters for report at this juncture. I know it's normally on the last business, but it seems to make more sense to get the public part of the meeting concluded before there is an attempt to go into private session. So, Councillor Hall, anything from you as another matter for report?
As I am your representative at the Parson Labour Trust, and I was at their trustee meeting just ahead of here, just to say that they continue on their usual sound financial footing and are making plans to modernise their constitution. And I mean, they're based back literally in the 16th century, and some parts of the way that they work are still within that original charter document, I'm going to call it. So they are moving to a much more modern constitution. I think it's going to be a charity limited by guarantee, but a large part of their assets are held in land, and a charity has to be very careful about buying and selling land and incurring tax liabilities. It makes sense to go to a format that gives them a little bit more flexibility with that. Yeah, the place is virtually full. The last two bungalows are, after a 9-month wait, being finally connected to the gas supply. A long, painful process has been for the clerk. So the final two bungalows, one of which is already let. So one of the ladies is in a flat is moving to one of the bungalows, so there'll just be one space. If anybody knows, a lady who is in probably financial, not difficulty, but isn't able, for example, to look after their own home anymore, really, will benefit from being in accommodation like that. Will be expecting that, there's a waiting list at the moment.
Thank you. Thank you.
I know I asked this a lot, but at the farmers market day, you know the parallel parking outside Tesco's, you know the ones that, I think some of the vans are being parked there. I didn't know whether that was okay or not, that was just an observation. I thought we had to park down into the co-op.
Yeah, I know some of them do leave them, have started leaving them, they did in sort of
Yeah.
lockdown time.
Just an observation.
I mean, if it's a problem and people complain, then I suppose we can ask them. I mean, ideally, I know that some of them parked, and we had some for the Thursday market parking there, because when the stores are quite close up to those spaces where cars were coming out, and we noticed it when we were working that one-way system, it was difficult to stop people walking through the market, and then you've got cars coming in and out, so it's almost like prevents cars pulling in and out of those spaces if they're there, because they're not going to move.
That's all right, Gary.
Nothing to add.
That's all right. I just remembered something else I should perhaps have mentioned in relation to that Bridge development. Councillors may have noticed that in the minutes of our last full council meeting, I reported on a meeting that the clerk and I, Councillor Davis, had had with David Wilson Holmes. And there was then some discussion in full council and a suggestion that perhaps we should talk to the landowner in connection with the provision of cemetery extension land, could it potentially be gifted outside of the arrangements with David Wilson Homes, etc. I'm aware that the clerk spoke to the chair of the period, and in fact, one of them then spoke to me, because Councillor Chester had spoken to him. As a result, he rang me in the theories. My understanding is they're locked into an option agreement, which means they can't basically talk to this, but it's a time-limited thing. So it may be a question of what's this space if, for example, their planning application gets to make back. So I should have said that earlier. Right. There is one other item on our agenda. It is an item of such nature that, in view of the special and/or confidential nature of the business about to be transacted, it is advisable in the public interest that the public be temporarily excluded, and they are instructed to withdraw, which unfortunately applies to our viewers too. So we shall say goodbye to you if somebody will second my proposition to go to Cabinet. Councillor Davis. All those in favour? Thank you very much.
I'll stop recording.